to Living Grounded. You're here with Lila and Tim.
Hello.
And each episode we answer one of your questions about how we continue living grounded in Christ.
Lila.
Hi.
Welcome. You're not Ella.
No, not really.
We're doing German imports now.
Yeah.
Okay.
I hope you'll benefit from it and learn some German along the way or something like that.
Okay. All right. I'm looking forward to that.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, on Sunday, we heard from Matthew 9 and about the importance and urgency to share our faith. And we got challenged to evaluate our hearts in that and what's holding us back from that. And we're also just praying for God to change our hearts and open our minds and our eyes to the truth that everyone needs to hear about Him. And one of the questions that came up with that was, what do we do if we want to share our faith in the workplace, but they have rules established that say we could lose our job for sharing our faith? And before I'm going to give that question to you, Tim, we're going to hear from Joel on how he's able to share his faith in his workplace.
I've found lots of joy in sharing my faith. I think it's what has kept me doing it over the last 3 years. Because there's been times when I've really disliked being there, a disability support worker, and it's been really rough. But there were a few individuals that I would share my faith with and share the gospel with and just have ongoing conversations with. There is a guy at my work who just tuned in to watch one of Tim's sermons last week because he's checking out Jesus. I've also been told by people, you can talk to me about anything, but just don't talk to me about Jesus. I don't want to know. And then I've also met people that have been very open to it and want to know more. Even people that have been going through a crisis and open to God. And yeah, I would usually kick off a conversation about myself, and I would say that I'm a Christian, I follow Jesus, and I go to church on Sunday, and a lot of the time, there will be, things that people do, like maybe they might leave early, and people might ask me, Joel, why don't you leave early? And I say, because I follow Jesus, and I want to try and maintain integrity, and things like that.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
it's
great. And then they'll sit back and be like, man, I would love to do that. I would love to do like that. And then, conversations through from that. But I find it really easy. You just have to be, just honest. I mean, I'm someone who follows Jesus, and that's part of my life. And so I just give them who I am. And that's someone that follows Jesus. Even if that annoys them, that means I'm going to play my Jesus music in the van. And because if I was driving, my own car, I'd be playing my Jesus music. So if I'm going to drive the bus, I'm going to be playing that as well. I'm not going to swap it for them. As much as, they might cringe, all for the glory of God.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's encouraging. What would you say is your motivation for sharing your faith with people?
I think that the gospel is the hope of the world, and I can't just let people go on in my life and just walk past me and be heading for a cliff and me not warn them and me not tell them that there's a path that leads to life. I think it's my duty or obligation as a Christian to share the gospel.
Pretty encouraging, hey?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, wow. Have you ever shared with anyone at a workplace?
I feel like actually most of the real workplaces were in kind of a Christian setting.
Yeah.
But then one time in working at a restaurant, people were asking me what I do on the weekends. I was really challenged to say, do I go to church? Do I went to that worship night? Or just that I just chilled and whatever else people would answer with that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tricky, hey? But no, it's hugely encouraging to hear someone who is really open about their faith, and you see the fruit. Joel's been telling me along the way, like my friend's been listening, and it's just been great.
That's
Yeah.
great. But what do we do now if like our workplace really has a rule that would not allow us to share our faith, and how do we wrestle with that?
Yeah. So, I guess to go back to particularly probably 2 Sundays ago, a sermon from Matthew's Gospel that Jesus has, saved us and he has sent us out to live a sent-shaped life. And I think that does include, to varying degrees, I think context does matter, but we should be on some sort of front foot looking to invite others to check out Jesus, to check out church, and so on. But of course that isn't simple, particularly for people in a bunch of workplaces, mostly government. But I had a quick look on the Human Rights Law Alliance website. There's a story of a lecturer, for instance, in WA who, she wore her Christianity on her sleeve at work, much like Joel, but she was given formal warnings and then threatened with disciplinary action and even psychological assessments, like there was something really wrong with her. And so, these things happen. This is the reality. Now, I do still think that it's fairly rare in Australia that you get that sort of reaction. It does happen, but I reckon probably what happens more is informal discrimination. So just start getting treated differently. I reckon if you work in the public service, you kind of feel like this could happen to you if it hasn't already. If you're open about your faith, maybe you won't lose your job, but you'll be treated differently. You'll get worse shifts maybe. You don't get promoted. You get shunned a little bit, treated like an outsider, like the bad guy maybe. So what do we do? Well, let's start with workplaces that actually have codes of conduct and rules against sharing your faith. I'll probably focus on that mostly, to be honest. I think this is where Romans 13 is helpful to think through. Let me read it to you. This is Paul saying, he says, "Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted. And those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers hold no terror for those who do right, but for those who do wrong. Do you want to be free from fear of the one in authority? Then do what is right and you will be commended. For the one in authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servants, agents of wrath, to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. Therefore, it is necessary to submit to the authorities, not only because of possible punishment, but also as a matter of conscience." Now, there's a lot going on there and a lot of questions that spring from it, obviously. But I think key thing to see is that authorities are put in place by God and that they're actually good. They're for our sake. God, when he says for good, for our good, he's talking about the good of society. So Paul in 1 Timothy 2 will talk about how we should pray for rulers and people in authority, because that's actually good for Christians. It's good for the sake of the gospel going out. Where there is peaceful and coherent society, ordered society, the gospel actually goes out better. Think about this. If there was no authority, then you share your faith with an unbeliever, and instead of just ignoring you, they can murder you. They can steal all your stuff. Just society breaks down isn't actually good for the gospel. So we should be thankful for those in authority. We should seek to obey them, generally speaking. But of course, that raises, the issue of what about when rulers or authorities outlaw the sharing of the gospel, or the belief in the gospel, or the attending of churches? Here's an important principle when reading the Bible. You need to be able to hold things in tension. Okay, here we have Romans 13, and its command, but we've got other commands as well. We've got love God and love your neighbour. Many of us felt some of this tension during COVID. Churches weren't allowed to gather. Churches in Germany allowed to gather?
No, not really. And some people still want to gather, and others are really firm, and we need to obey the authorities. That was a challenge.
So that was a challenge over here, a challenge over there, many places. And it's a challenge because there is a command to love, and lots of people saw that command as applying to loving the sick and the vulnerable. So don't gather during the pandemic because we want to love those who are sick and vulnerable. But other people felt that that was stopping loving God. And, you know, gathering as God's people is to love God, but also to love people. That's where we support and encourage one another as brothers and sisters. So that's another form of love. So there's a tension here, and it's not always absolutely clear which way that should play out. And so it is with Romans 13, I think. We're commanded to love our neighbour.
Mm-hmm.
I think compelled by love, loving your neighbour should also be with a shape to wanting to see them won to Christ. What could be the most loving thing? It's sharing the good news of the gospel with them. We want to see our work colleagues, our clients, know Jesus. But then, okay, you're in a workplace, Romans 13, you're in a situation that forbids this. What do? Well, here's what I would do. Here's generally what I would do. And so personal experience, I was a high school teacher in a public high school. I've had to work through this for myself. Firstly, I would generally honour the code of conduct in the workplace. But I would seek to do everything I could around that code of conduct to still evangelise, honour Jesus, draw people to him. So that means I made sure that people knew I went to church and that I was a Christian. So I accepted that there might be some ramifications for that. Maybe I wouldn't lose my job. When people ask me a question, though, what did you do on the weekend, like you were saying, my first response would be, I went to church. Then they know. I felt the temptations you feel. I could have said, I wanted to say, I play soccer, or something like that. That's going to be heaps easier and, whatever. Yeah. But made sure. No, I went to church. That's the first thing I did. Mm-hmm. That sparks a conversation. You're not breaking any rules by answering someone's question. I think we don't need to worry too much about that. But there might be some implications. People might treat you differently. I made sure that I didn't participate in things like workplace gossip. As Joel was talking about, he didn't go home early, even if that's what some people did in the workplace. He honoured Jesus, and he made it, he made it somewhat clear that the reason I'm not doing some of these things is because I believe in Jesus. So you stay away from unethical practices. You don't participate in those sort of cultures. I particularly looked for opportunities to connect with people outside of the workplace. Our workplaces at this point cannot police what conversations we have at the pub or, having a coffee. So if there were work drinks, I'd really try to make it. And that would be an opportunity to hopefully talk a little bit more freely. I'd often look for one or two relationships that seemed really fruitful. Sometimes these places can just feel overwhelming. Too many, how do I have a conversation with all of these people, build relationship? You can't. But what if there was one or two people that you felt like there was a good connection with? I'd look for that. I'd pray for those people particularly, and I'd look for opportunities to invite them to church or a church event where it was appropriate, where you could. Whether that's inside the workplace or outside the workplace, you've got to kind of use your wisdom on that one. But the point is, you build relationships, you make it know that you're a believer, and you see if people will come to you. See what happens, see what God does. Let's go to an even trickier piece, though. That's work colleagues. What about clients, or in my case, it was school kids, but, for nurses, doctors, these sorts of things, it's your student, it's your clients, I guess is probably the best word. Now, I did something of the same. Again, not feeling like I needed to push on them my faith, but when the opportunity provided, if the question gets asked, being willing, indicating that I would believe, that I do believe, that I go to church, and so on. I'd be the teacher that provided a room for scripture, and supported that work. Again, kind of identifying myself, I'm a Christian. Some kids I had a really good connection with, and I would wait until they finished year 12, and then I often found they would get in contact with me just to say hello, and I would invite them to church. I would say, you should come check out church sometime, or something like that. again, I haven't broken the formal agreement of the public school. I've waited till they're outside of it. I think one thing to say is that I reckon we can trust in God's sovereignty that generally speaking, you don't need to break your workplace rules in order for his people to come to Christ. You can trust that will happen in some form or another, whether it doesn't have to be through you. So you work within the boundaries as best you can while still trying to live a sent-shaped life.
Mm-hmm.
Something along those lines.
Yeah,
yep.
And a big role that plays into that too is prayer, I guess, where you can pray for your workplace, for the people around you, for wisdom and that, for opportunities. And for me, for example, working in a restaurant where I really didn't have any space or opportunity to talk to the people I would serve, but I could pray for them every time I could go to their table. And then it's up to God what he does with that, and also praying for opportunities to come up with that, and then for the boldness to be able to share him.
Yep. Prayer is just something we can always do, should always do. Pray specific prayers for the people you work with, for the clients and so on. Pray that God would draw people to you. Pray that he would help you to take opportunities where they come. Pray that he would give you wisdom about how to operate. But let me throw one last piece in, okay? I reckon there is one place where you probably, where I hope I would disobey the authorities directly and just go for it. One or two situations where I would probably put my job on the line for the sake of evangelism. One would be if I was faced with a death kind of situation. So maybe if you were a nurse or a doctor, and you might come across just a moment, an opportunity where you feel led by the Spirit that this might be the only opportunity for this person to hear the gospel in their lifetime, in what's left of their life. I reckon maybe losing your job, being treated differently, whatever the scale, might just be worth it there. Maybe it's another situation, not quite as full on as that, but another situation where you just get that sense, like this person is open, they're desperate, they need Jesus, they want Jesus. I'm feeling compelled to do that, but I know this is going to come to bite me. Maybe it's just worth it. Maybe just to take that moment, to trust that that's a moment delivered by God. Maybe the consequences are worth it in that case. That's something for you to wrestle with. This is something for each one of our consciences that we've got to think through. But I reckon really worth thinking about what would you do?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow, that's challenging. Yeah, but trusting God with that, and that he will provide for us in that. Thank you so much for sharing. Keep sending in your questions either through the phone or through the app if you want to stay anonymous. And thank you so much for listening. Tim, is there anything else that's coming up this week or that you want to share?
Look, church gatherings, we're continuing to work through Matthew's gospel, encouraging to see the life of Jesus, be challenged by him. But also, I guess the big thing at the moment for us to just keep, I call on you to be helpful to your organisers at Village. Make sure you register for church camp if you haven't already. And if you're a member of Village, make sure you do your pledge. That would be really helpful for those who keep church organised and running and so on. Yeah. Thanks in advance.
Thanks for sharing. That's it for this week. See you next week, and auf Wiedersehen.
Ciao. That's fun.